It is our final PGA DFS podcast of the 2020 calendar year as the PGA Tour is heading down to Mexico for the Mayakoba Golf Classic. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective and let you know who you should roster for the final time in 2020. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, final PGA podcast of the year. I am getting teary-eyed thinking about it. Like, what am I supposed to do on Tuesdays after this is done?
Yeah, I had two thoughts. One was we had 1 week off from golf preparation, and I kind of forgot my process already. But now we're going to have like 4-ish weeks off. And yeah. I remember last year and in years past, I'm like, what is golf again? Just because we get so heavy into the NFL, and then the NBA will be started by then. Yeah. So yeah, it's a little strange, but thankfully we end with a pretty good field.
Yeah, we do. We have Justin Thomas and Brooks Koepka at the top end of the odds chart this week, and it's not like it's just those guys. There are other good names kind of scattered throughout the field, so I feel pretty good about this event from a DFS perspective. I'm excited to talk through JT and Brooks, and always fun to go down to Mexico for the Mayakoba Golf Classic. It is at El Camaleon Golf Course. It is 7,039 yards and a par 71. And there are about 130 golfers in the field for this week, with the top 65 plus ties making the cut after 2 rounds. So roughly half the field will make the cut. So that's something to always kind of keep in mind. Is like the baseline cut odds for everyone is about 50%. You can obviously bump that up for the good golfers, but that's where your baseline is. And that is an important thing to keep in mind because it means that you will need to find golfers who are better than that and try to, ensure you are maximizing your cut odds for your cash game rosters. And that's not easy in an event like this. So, Brandon, we're trying to find those guys who can make the cut, push for a good finish. What stats stand out in past events at El Camaleon?
Yeah, there's no shot length data, so no strokes gained information from these particular events. So it's always, there's some guesswork always whenever it comes to figuring out what stands out, what separates these guys. But we do know a few things. One, driving accuracy is more important here than at the usual PGA Tour course, according to datagolf.com. As you would expect, then there's a dip in the importance of driving distance. The course is not particularly long, this par 71. So, there's a 116-yard par 3, 2 more par 3s around 150, 3 par 5s around 550 or shorter. So, I mean, it's going to play pretty easily. 10 holes last year played below par on average. So we know that you got to go low. The past 4 winners were all at least 19 under par. So we need birdies and we need scoring. Distance isn't a must. So that kind of keeps almost everyone in the mix. And that kind of, just to foreshadow a bit, puts me a little bit lower on guys like Justin Thomas, more specifically Brooks Koepka. But we've seen in recent events where if it's a birdie fest, you don't have to be long. These are all the best golfers in the world, so they can contend over 4 days. It's the longer courses, the more grueling courses where the best guys can separate. So I think it's a little more wide open, even with Justin Thomas being such a heavy favorite at 6-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. So to get back to the important stats for me, it's going to be very basic. You need to score. That generally comes from great iron play. And with this course specifically, hitting fairways. You have to putt well. We're on past Palom this week, which is pretty rare. There's no strokes gain data from this surface, and birdie or better rates. So, you scoring on the par 5s will really help you go low. I just always caution against like unadjusted par 5 scoring because not all par 5s are made the same. But I'm keeping it simple with strokes gain approach. Number 1, driving accuracy, strokes gain putting, and birdie or better rate. Those are my 4 key stats.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking for like a shorthand for this week, if you're looking for just like a quick and easy way to find golfers who could stand out, look for golfers who are accurate but make birdies. And I know that that's like oversimplifying, but if you can find a guy who puts the ball in the fairway but isn't just like laying up and getting on the fairway and can actually like get you a birdie or better after that. I think that that's a pretty key combo. And I know that sounds like reductive, but that's not overly common. There are a lot of guys who will have good accuracy, but aren't getting those birdies on other spots. So I think that, to me, that's kind of the shorthand that I want for this week, is guys who can put it on the fairway, but also grade out well. I have birdies or better gained in via Fantasy National as my stat. I think that, like, if you can just find guys who can do both those things, obviously it's going to imply that they are good at their approach shot as well. So I think that's kind of like the shorthand I'm using for this week.
I have, according to Fantasy National, over the past 50 rounds, I see 6 golfers inside the top 30, which is arbitrary, of course, but inside the top 30 in fairways gained and birdie or better rate gained. Mm-hmm. They're Daniel Berger, Abraham Ancer, Russell Henley, Brendan Todd, Denny McCarthy, and Kevin Streelman. I think all those guys are justifiable plays this week. Now, only one of them is inside the top 20 in birdie or better rate, and that's Daniel Berger. And we both like him a lot this week. But
yeah,
if that's who's popping out in such a simple checklist, I think it's probably not the worst way to go.
Right.
Like I said, I'd be fine with any of those guys on my rosters.
Right. It is reductive, but sometimes reductive is okay because you're not overly complicating things. So that's where I'm at roughly for this week's event. We're going to take a look at past history at El Camaleon in just 1 second. But first, FanDuel Sportsbook is giving new users an opportunity to win big on this Sunday's matchup between Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans and Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. Right now, you have a chance. I know it could have been Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, but hey, whatever.
Well, it's also your favorite and least favorite quarterback, basically.
Yeah.
Close to it.
Yeah. But we also get Dehember, so we should not overlook that. Right now, you have the chance to bet $5 on either the Titans or the Browns at plus 2,500 odds. And if you win, you'll make $125. You heard that correctly. Bet $5, win $125. The offer is for this Sunday's game only. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook mobile app, sign up, and make your first deposit to see your enhanced odds today. Must be 21 plus, and this offer is only valid in Illinois, Indiana, or Tennessee. New users only. Must wager on the designated boost market. Deposits are required. Max bonus $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Or in Tennessee, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Let's dig into past events here at El Camaleon. We actually got a lot of course history here to dig into. As you said, no shot link data, so we won't have that, but we can see who has done well here in the past and maybe is a course fit for this week. That start things off here with Ricky Fowler. We talk about Fowler a bit here on the podcast, not always in the most glowing terms because the approach play has been kind of wonky recently. So, Brandon, when you look back at Fowler, specific at El Camaleon, and mix that with this course history, how do you wind up settling on him?
Yeah, I think he's fascinating because his salary is $11,000 on FanDuel. That puts him right between Abraham Ancer at 11-1, Russell Henley at 10-9. Ancer and Henley are guys that we probably both like, especially at courses where accuracy goes a long way, but they definitely don't have the name value that Ricky Fowler has. So I thought he would be interesting to dig into. And, his course history here is not usually as lengthy as what we typically target and break down, but I think it's noteworthy because he's been good here, one of the biggest names in the field, and he's shown flashes of late in his data. He had a runner-up finish here in 2017, then came back to finish 16th the following year. So again, it's all we have, but 2 top 16s, including a runner-up, that is enough to get me to look deeper at Ricky Fowler. We most recently saw him at Augusta when he finished 29th. At that course, he hit 80% of his fairways to rank top 15 in the field. He was about field average in greens and regulation. Greens and regulation can be misleading, but we don't have shot link data there either, so we can kind of at least do our best there. The putter was fine, not great if you look at things from a putts per green and regulation perspective, which again, not great. But what that goes to show me is that didn't really just do it from the putter, wasn't errant off the tee, wasn't struggling to hit greens and regulation and just scrambling his way to that 29th. So I think that's promising. And before that, Fowler's been someone we've talked about, here and there. He did have 2 dreadful events with the irons at the Zozo and the Shriners, but overall, I don't think he's the worst idea if he can just hit fairways, make some birdies. over the past 50 rounds on the PGA Tour, according to Fantasy National. He's 27th in birdies gained, 13th in opportunities gained, which is basically just birdie chances. So, if he can just play his game right now, hit some fairways, make some putts, not totally lose it with the irons, I think that he would be a pretty justifiable play. I don't think it'll be that popular just because Justin Thomas is such a standout play. So, I don't know if the current form's too up and down. I don't know if there's better process plays to pivot to. I think Fowler's a little interesting. He's definitely my favorite play around that salary. But any thoughts for you on Ricky Fowler?
I think it's kind of like a numbers game where he'll get squeezed out because, you mentioned Abraham Answer and Russell Henley as being guys we like more, and I like them quite a bit more because Fowler is basically a step below Answer in both the ball striking stats and relatively even to him in the short game numbers. Whereas Henley is much better in the ball striking numbers and not quite as good in the short game. And I think that I'd rather just take one of those guys rather than go with Fowler. So I think that's kind of where I hang up. If you look at guys who have a salary of 10-6 or higher on FanDuel, Fowler's the only one ranked outside the top 35 in approach. So I would need him to be like a standout short game guy to get there. And he's good. Obviously, he can do well there. But it's not enough for me to use him over the other guys in that range. So it's not that I'm actively off of Ricky Fowler. I'm just not going to get there because the other guys in that range, to me, actually do have an allure rather than okay, they're fine situation.
Yeah. I thought I would like Fowler a little bit more, but looking at, like you said, those golfers right around him. Spoiler alert, I like Victor Hovland a lot. Mm-hmm. He's 11-3, so 300 more in salary than Fowler. And then the lower 10,000 range has some names who are intriguing, but Fowler's, again, like you said, the lone kind of outlier in approach among golfers above 10-6, and as a result, he's actually kind of low in my win simulations because that does factor in the quite predictive strokes gain approach data. So I thought I would be more in on Fowler, but looking at what else we have, it's, I never thought I'd see the day, but I like Russell Henley more than Ricky Fowler.
I know. It's a very strange realm to be in. You mentioned the 10,000 range might be with a couple of guys down there who are interesting. One of them might be Brendan Todd. And you actually alluded to him as being one of the guys who can hit fairways but also make birdies. And Todd is actually the defending champ at this event. So let's talk about him here. So that's at least worth discussing because of that. Todd won last year. He went 20 under to win the tournament. He was just a stroke ahead of three different guys. So it wasn't a dominant win, but hey, a win's a win, and 20 under is 20 under. So that definitely counts. It makes sense that Todd would do well here because he's not long, but he is third in fairways gained, according to Fantasy National. He is also good enough as a putter to convert when he gives himself chances for birdies. Todd is $10,000. That's not a low salary, and the approach game is still not good for Brendan Todd, but he can finish well. He's a course fit. So, Brandon, at $10,000, are you checking out Brendan Todd this week?
Yeah, I actually bet Todd already to win. Found him at a good number, but we were just talking about Fowler, maybe he can hit fairways and make putts, but Brendan Todd does that. Those two things
it's
better.
Not a maybe situation. It's he does.
He does those things better. Third in fairways gained. It's really, I was going to say tough to beat that, but I was going to just set myself up to be insulted there. But really, really, really good putter. First over the past 50, fourth over the past 100. I don't have surface splits this week just because of the past Palom surface, but Todd can get hot with the irons. If it's not there, it can be a little bit messy for him. But overall, for the salary, I think you could do way worse than Brendan Todd.
We've also talked about Todd in events where distance may have been a bit more necessary. And like I said, 10,000 is not restrictive from a salary perspective. So I think this is a good spot to go at Todd. I am more willing to use guys who feast in the short game in spots like this, and that is Todd. So I think that although he's someone I'm largely hesitant to use, this will not be one of those weeks. Let's talk about some guys who have some lower salaries who have done well at El Camaleon in the past. Starting off with Pat Perez. Brandon, interesting course history here, and he's actually got a couple of events of data as well. What do you see with Perez, both there and recently?
So Perez has popped at this course. Actually won here 4 years ago. 34th, 6th, and 8th since then. It's hard to argue against that as far as course form goes. The recent form looks bad. He's missed 4 straight cuts, which is usually like an automatic no. But it's really not as bad as it sounds, and that's why it's important to dig into the strokes gained data whenever a guy misses a cut. If you look at his tee to green numbers, he's gained 3, 1.8, lost 3.3, which is bad, yes, and then lost 0.7 strokes in these. So it's not all amazing, but if you gain strokes tee to green and miss the cut, it's probably because you didn't putt well, and that was the case. He lost at least a full stroke from putting in three of the 4. But the irons have just been better than average. So the results look awful. Data is, I would say, considerably better. I won't say it's flawless by any means, but that can lead to a bounce back opportunity. He's 32nd in approach over the past 50 rounds, 36th in good drives gained, which is either a fairway or a green regulation if you miss the fairway. So, he can be accurate enough. He can hit the irons, and again, we've seen him play well at this course. And I do think, I'll probably say this, later on, but for the guys who just aren't standouts, who aren't the elite of the elite, I do think course form probably matters a little bit more. And so I'm more willing to factor in course form for lower salaried golfers. So I think people might be into Perez because of the course form, but then be turned off by the current form. But I think that's probably a little misleading because the stats have been pretty fine. So any thoughts on Perez?
And it's not like he's erratic on the greens normally. He's been putting poorly recently, but if you look at the past 100 rounds, he ranks 1st or 15th in putting. So there is a good chance that he is able to rebound there.
Right.
Like you said, good approach play, good iron play, even though he's had some bad events. Like we talk about guys who can have pop events, and gaining 3 on approach, which he did in that span, that's good. Like that's a pop event, especially because it was probably just 2 rounds, I'd assume. So I think that Perez actually does make a decent amount of sense. I am okay with him because you're not going to find a perfect golfer who is under $9,000. He's $8,900, like you said. The course form is there. He's shown signs of life recently, so I think there is enough there to go at Pat Perez. Probably not my favorite guy in the value range, but definitely someone I'm on board with. Let's talk about a similar guy here as well while we're on the subject of value plays, and Bryce Garnett, because he's been to El Camaleon 4 times the past 5 years, and he's been in the top 25 all 4 times. That includes a pair of top 10s. He was 7th in 2016, 5th in 2019, and then 11th last year as well. And Garnett, the form is not good. He's 71st in approach, 78th in birdies or better gain, but he's a guy who putts fine. He gains fairways. He has done it here in the past. So how are you feeling about Bryce Garnett, and where does he grade out for you relative to Pat Perez, who is in a similar salary range?
I like Perez more. Garnett is the recent form, despite not having 4 missed cuts in a row. Like the tee to green game has been better for Perez. Mm-hmm. So that is something that I think we should all take as a learning experience, where I'd rather have someone who actually misses a cut but is gaining strokes tee to green than finishing 50th or 60th just because they're putting really well. So that's kind of what I see from Garnett. Is he's carrying himself with a putter, which can work, especially at a course that's not overly difficult. But if I had to pick between Perez and Garnett, it's going to be Perez probably like 10 out of 10 times.
I agree, because the form that you alluded to is just like it's a lot better. Like it's kind of like we talked about with Ricky Fowler versus Brendan Todd. I'm not projecting them to do something. Perez is already doing it. So I think that's valuable. And I think that if I had to choose between the two, I'd go Perez. Again, not my favorite guy in that range, but he will be in my player pool at some point this week.
And he's got that 2 out of 7 cuts on FanDuel. So I think people, like I said, like the course form's there, so people might look and then I'm like 2 out of 7 cuts, probably not. So
right, and I think that's fairly prevalent. You check the game logs before you plug someone in. It makes sense,
and especially Justin Thomas is going to be massively popular. Right. I usually think of things in terms of cumulative popularity rates. So if you just add up the popularity, people smarter than I have pointed out that it's probably better to do like a product where you multiply them all. So if you get someone like Perez at like 5%, that's going to help you be more unique in these big tournaments.
Right, exactly. It's combinations. I think that's why you multiply it.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. And Perez, I think, does enough where I feel good about him there. So let's move into some current form golfers who have been hot recently, and not a lot of guys have been that much hotter than Russell Henley. He hasn't been as hot recently, but still really good numbers across the board. He is just a cup below Justin Thomas and Brooks Koepka from an odds perspective. But Brandon, as you've mentioned a couple of times, like the play hasn't really been a notch below them recently.
Yeah, I've joked in the past that Russell Henley has basically been Justin Thomas since the restart, give or take. It's really, it's not, at this point, I don't know if it's that much of a joke.
Right.
He and Thomas have gained strokes tee to green in 82% and 84%, respectively, of their past 50 rounds. Only Harold Varner at 80% is also above 74%. So, the amount of strokes gained is one thing, but I do think there's probably some relevancy to the percentage in which you gain strokes. I probably is a lot more. It's probably more predictive of consistency than it would be just looking at overall numbers and not adjusting for like the spike weeks. But Thomas and Henley are identical in their percentages of rounds gained off the tee, 62%, which is wild, and with approach at 74%. Thomas is better around the green. And that's not to say like Russell Henley is just as good as Justin Thomas. That's not what I'm saying. But he's very, very good. And we look at Justin Thomas in this field and say he is the play. I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like that's but Russell Henley's been very, very, very good. He's now finished top 30 in 8 straight events with 4 top 10s in that span. He does have the ability to gain massively from his approach numbers too. So he's been consistent, but there are huge outputs from him. He just isn't an elite putter by any means. He's 81st over the past 50 rounds overall, but Russell Henley is very, very good right now. He's at the top of the list whenever or I should say in the discussion, at the top of the list for me once you account for salary. So is he viable enough to pivot away from some of these other guys for you, or are you not quite there yet?
I was going through the exercise you mentioned, like ranking guys after considering salary, and I think that JT is 1, despite the fact that he's $12,600. I think that Daniel Berger is number 2, and I think Henley's number 3. Like Henley is in that top 3 for me, and it's not like a shock if you have listened to us over the past couple of months. We've loved Henley for a while now, and I think it's justified. Also because like, if you go with Berger and Henley as your top 2 guys, you're going to have a very different roster construction than people who decide to go with Justin Thomas or Brooks Koepka too, because the salary gap is huge between those guys.
Yeah.
So I think that there actually is a lot of value in going with like a Berger-Henley combination, just because it's going to make you very different from the rest of the field. And it's not like you're losing a lot from a win equity perspective. So personally, I'm on board with it. I would still go Justin Thomas if I had a cash game lineup. And like, if I had one lineup, I would still consider JT for that as well. But if I'm multi-entering for tournaments, I feel like a Berger-Henley build will wind up being one of my favorites. And I wouldn't be shocked if that's where I wound up if I had just one bullet.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of things from like a single entry perspective, if you join like a single entry contest, JT is going to be, I would have to think.
What's the fear of missing out? Like you don't want to have one lineup and like not have JT in it.
Right. What would you guess? Maybe 40% ish?
I'll set the over under at 42.
So like, either way, 40+% probably for Justin Thomas. Yes, he's way more likely than that to make the cut. He's about 12% likely to win.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just look at it from that standpoint, like, yes, if Justin Thomas finishes second, you probably need to have him. But if he's like 12th, 15th, something like that, has a good weekend, I think that I think I'm probably more on board with avoiding JT in tournaments than I probably should be. But I am kind of a donkey when it comes to this stuff because I try to just play the percentages. if I'm building a cash game, it's Justin Thomas. And one of the reasons it's so easy to do that is your next golfer.
Yeah. So let's talk about Brian Harmon here. He is, I think, mis-salaried. I think it's fair to say that. He is $7,000, the minimum salary on FanDuel. And he's 60-1 to win a FanDuel sportsbook. You were saying he actually is short.
I've seen him shorter than that.
So, yeah, it's a missed salary. But with golf, like, anybody can miss the cut, so we should at least discuss him and decide if he's worth the discount for tournaments, because cash games, you just use Brian Harmon. Like, take the discount. Yeah. The problem is that Harmon doesn't really miss cuts. He missed at the RSM, which was the most recent event, but before that, he had made 11 straight. Harmon grades out well statistically for the course outside of the approach play. 23rd in fairways gained, 29th in birdies or better gained, so checks both those boxes. 18th in putting, so there's actually a lot of safety for a guy who's $7,000, and for that reason, I'm kind of inclined to just like suck it up and play him as a chalk in tournaments, because like if you go with like the Henley, Berger, and then go Harmon, you are living in the 10,000 range, and I think that's really attractive to me. So I kind of feel like it's a good week to swallow the chalk. I know that I do this a lot, so maybe don't take it from me. But Brandon, what are your thoughts on Brian Harmon at $7,000?
So he's going to be popular. And the combination of Brian Harmon and Justin Thomas will be very popular. If you're playing one lineup, I think you just play him. Because it's not like it's not like when we had, who was it, Ollie Schneiderjans at 7,000. Brian Harmon's better than that. He's usually like
Ollie finished third. Let's not besmirch Ollie.
But process,
no, I know
you're right.
He wasn't. You're right. We love Ollie here.
Harmon's like a top, even at worst, like a top 20-ish play probably in the field. So I think maybe you just play 100%. I think that's justifiable. He's like 30% likely in my sims to miss the cut. Data Golf has him at about 25% likely to miss the cut. I think you're probably...
I mean, I'd be okay just playing it based on those percentages and like going 75%.
Sure, but it's also not... He's not even 8,000. He's 7,000.
Right.
And it's not like you're guaranteeing that you make the cut. If Brian Harmon misses the cut, it doesn't mean that someone else makes, like, that the guys you play make the cut. So I don't know.
I've never had a golfer miss the cut, Brandon. How dare you? Never in my life.
I think that Brian Harmon is not someone you should get too cute with, because the only way that a full fade would pay off is if he basically withdraws or like gets negative points or something. So I don't know.
Yeah, don't put that in the ether. Don't let that be a possibility. If we don't want bad juju. I cursed Will Fuller yesterday by saying I hope he'd be on the main slate. He immediately tested positive for PEDs. Did you just lead to Brian Harmon having some happy thing that led him to go not to Mexico? Like, did you curse the situation here?
I've never had a track record of that kind of stuff, so.
It's just me? Okay, cool.
I think so.
Oh, all right. So I'm the only one who's a jinx here. So let's move on to Keegan Bradley and put the hex on him instead. Bradley is – I know he doesn't need it. $9,300. And Keegan, hey, accuracy, good. Approach, good. Is that enough? Talk to me about Keegan Bradley and what he's done recently.
Yeah, there might be a hex on his putter. Maybe that's –
Might be. Has been, I think, might be the better way to phrase that for a very long time.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. He's like a frenemy, I think.
Yeah.
Of the heat check, because we used to love him, use him all the time. Then we wised up, but he's been better. Like now, I don't know if we're back on him, if he's back totally. But like you said, I mean, a lot of the data is there to like him, and he's had some high-end finishes on his resume of late. 4th at the Sanderson Farms, missed the cut at the Shriners. 42nd at the CJ Cup, cut at the Houston Open. 15th though at the RSM. If you picked up the trend, it's alternating cuts. So if that sticks around, he'll miss the cut. But that's not a thing. It's not.
Are you sure?
I tried to do that with DeAndre Hopkins, but he did not go over 100 yards. He had 55 last week.
It was statistically impossible for that to happen, and yet it happened.
Yeah, so maybe that is So Keegan, I guess, if I say he's going to make the cut, he's going to miss the cut. So
Yeah.
I guess we can wrap this section up, I guess. But, so like the way that he's finished well or finished poorly, it's always similar. I mean, he gained off the tee in all of those 5, but the high-end finishes came when he gained at least 3 strokes off the tee. He's gained at least 2.3 from approach in all 5, meaning the irons seem like they're clicking. But he's lost at least 2.7 strokes with his putter in 4 of these past 5. He's lost strokes putting in 13 of his past 14. It is hard to finish well if you putt so poorly. And they're not just like half a stroke loss. They can be 2 to 3 to 4 strokes lost putting. But that said, he leads the field in strokes gained tee to green and ball striking over the past 24 rounds. It's a pretty predictive way to be in the mix, but the putter is almost bound to fail him at this point. So does like the ball striking and the accuracy do enough to get you back on the ride once more with Keegan?
Probably not, because I feel like I don't have to. Like, it's not a great tier by any means, but there are golfers in that tier who can make birdies. And like Keegan doesn't really. He's 59th in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. You got Kevin Streelman, who's 18th.
Hard to make birdies when you can't make a putt.
You know, it is. I can confirm that is true. Sepp Straka is 5th in birdies or better gained. He's 93. Denny McCarthy is 22nd. And those are all guys who also have accuracy similar to Keegan. So I can get like similar-ish guys who actually make birdies, and I'd rather just do that, I guess. I love the ball striking, but I don't want to fall for that again with Keegan because I know that it can go so poorly. Like, is he going to burn me? Am I going to get burned for not using Keegan Bradley? Probably not.
Well, that's the thing. Like the 2 top 15s, one of them was a top 4. I know this is years ago, but 8th at Mayakoba in 2015, 15th in 2016. I think that there is a path that he burns you, but there's also a very obvious path he burns you for the other direction if he misses the cut. So, I thought he was one of the more fascinating plays in this range. I still think that's the case. I think there is legitimate upside because of what he does well. Yeah. But he's really got to make some putts, I think, to maximize that. So it is scary. But again, what really pushed me off was, look, we know he's a bad putter, but losing in 13 of the past 14 looks like roughly 18 of the past 20 if you keep going. Like, you can't really win golf events if you putt so poorly and so consistently bad. So I thought I'd have more Keegan, but I'll probably just bounce off of him entirely.
You can't win while putting poorly unless you just scorch the earth with your ball striking. So let's talk about Corey Connors here, because I have been off of Connors for a pretty long time. We're going
to talk Corey Connors after everything we just said about Keegan, and somehow we're going to spin it more positively.
Maybe. And I talked about how Keegan can't really burn you most of the time for not using him. Connors has, and I've missed out because, like I said, I've kind of avoided him for a while due to the putting, but he's been ripping off a lot of good finishes. Connors has 3 top 10s in his past 4 events. One of those was at the Masters. That's pretty good. So it's not like they were super soft fields. He ranks 4th in accuracy and 10th in approach the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. 31st in birdies or better gained in the past 50 rounds because the putting is bad. It does help, though, that the putting has been a bit less bad recently. He has lost more than a stroke putting in just 5 of 16 measured events since the end of the COVID layoff. That's better than Keegan. I put the cutoff at 1 stroke as opposed to losing strokes in general, but he's not bombing as often. It's only 30% of the time as opposed to 100% of the time. So still not a good putter, but he's doing a better job of mitigating disaster, I think is the way I'll put this for Connors. So is that enough for you to get in on Connors at 10-8, or are you still wary here?
The salary is what makes me most nervous because I like Russell Henley a lot this week. I like Joaquin Niemann quite a bit this week. I like just above that Abraham Answer, Victor Hovland. I think that's really what gets me off. But I mean, if you look at his tee degree numbers, there's almost always I don't know what they would rank within in the tournament, but probably close to top 15, top 10.
Yep.
And like you said, if he just putts neutrally, which is what he did at the RSM. Gained 0.2, gained 2.6 at the Zozo when he finished 8th, but gained 0.1 at the Sanderson Farms and he finished 17th. Like, as long as he's not terrible,
Right.
24th at the Houston Open, losing 0.2. Like, he's so good tee to green that he's in the mix. So it is a little bit. It's a very different scenario between he and Keegan. Not that the salaries are really that comparable, but I think he's a very defensible play. I just probably won't be there myself because I prefer some other guys.
I think that the best time to use Connors is when his ball striking stands out relative to guys in his tier. Whereas like here, I can get guys who strike the ball maybe not as well, but pretty close. Like if I'm choosing between Connors and Ricky Fowler, I'll take Connors because there the ball striking does stand out relative to Fowler. But like relative to Henley, relative to Berger, who's like 500 or 600 higher, like that is a noticeable difference for sure. Yeah. But like I'd rather find that 600 to get to Berger. If
he were like 10,000, I'd be like, yeah, he's a much better play. But so close to other guys, it is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, if I can get a more well-rounded golfer while not losing that much in the ball striking categories, I'll take that, and I can with Connors this week. So he's not going to probably be my player pool. Like you said, it's a defensible play, but I'm probably not going to get there. Hopefully we can get it back to a spot where Connors is like, more of a mid-range or lower salary, because then I will happily buy back in because like we said, even mitigating disaster, that's valuable for him, but I want to get there first.
4 straight top 25s, though, including a 10th at the Masters. I mean, the salary's correct. He should be in that range, but...
So, Corey, take a week off from the putter, miss a couple for us, miss a cut, and we'll be back to you in January. How about that?
We are not that far removed from the BMW when he lost 7.8 strokes putting, gaining 8.1 tee to green. So
we have a gentleman's agreement, Corey. If you miss the cut, we will be back in on you in January. Come back to us, Fred. Let's take a look at what bookmakers are saying about the Mayakoba Golf Classic. Justin Thomas, the heavy favorite at FanDuel Sportsbook, he is 6-1. Brooks Koepka is also on an island by himself at 11-1. Abraham Answer, Daniel Berger, and Harris English are all 16-1. Then we get to Tony Finau and Victor Hovland at 18-1. After them, there is a pretty big dip down to Fowler, Russell Henley, and Will Zalatoris. They are all 27-1. Corey Connors and Joaquin Niemann are 31-1. And Carlos Ortiz and Mark Leishman round at the top group at 34-1. So the obvious headliners here are JT and Brooks. We've been talking about them a bit throughout the podcast, and their win odds are reflected in their salaries. JT 12.6. Brooks 12-2, respectively. So how are we handling those two guys this week? Start off with the cash games and then go to tournaments after that.
Cash games, you lock in Justin Thomas. I don't think you play Brooks in a cash game. This is not a major. Again, this is a course where you should expect the winning score to be somewhere around 20 under unless the weather is just crazy. Which it can be, but that does not favor Brooks necessarily because, put a blindfold on, throw a dart at this field. Odds are that golfer can go like at least 10 under if things are going the right way. So it's just a lot harder for someone like Brooks to separate. So JT in a cash game, I would say 10 times out of 10, not there with Brooks. For tournaments, I think I would probably be underweight on Justin Thomas because he's such a big favorite that we know he's got about a 1 out of 10 chance to win, which is not high enough to eat that much chalk. I wouldn't say I'd full fade him, but I would be underweight. And then I think Brooks is a better tournament play, but even then, there are just other golfers who kind of fit this course better, who can maybe score. Like I fear Brooks at those courses. They're going to play at par or 4 under. This is not one of those.
Right. I think for me, the reason that I'm not on Brooks for tournaments is that if I'm not going to use JT, I want a different roster construction than the JT lineups. And if you use Brooks, it's pretty similar. And just because I think the odds that JT burns you are pretty low. So a JT lineup, even if he doesn't win, is probably not dead. I want to have a situation where I'm deviating from that. And I think that that's the incentive for me. So I'm probably going to wind up being roughly even with the field on Justin Thomas. I think 50% is probably where I will wind up. But in the other half of my lineups, I want to make sure I have an actively different roster construction. One way we can do so is by using golfers in that second tier, because the salary dip from JT and Brooks down to them is significant. It does give you an actively different roster construction. So in that second tier, the guys who are like, let's say 16-1 to 30-1, I'll open it up a little bit here. Who has the best profile for DFS for you in that range?
Did you name all these guys, or I spaced out?
So like Harris English, Daniel Berger, Abe Answer, Victor Hovland, Finau, Henley, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. I would say Daniel Berger,
okay,
Russell Henley, and Victor Hovland are the three that I would be most likely to target. I'll talk about two of them more in player picks. We're both on Daniel Berger. I would have mentioned him actually number one in player picks, but you're already there. I'm not spoiling anything, but I think they are kind of a cut above the rest. I initially was into Finau just because of the birdie rate, but I think that it's very easy to get blinded by Tony Finau because he's just such a cool guy, and I want to forgive him for his shortcomings. But he's not an accurate driver, and I don't think distance is enough to kind of I just think that there are better process plays, specifically Victor Hovland as a direct pivot from Tony Finau. So, again, I would say Berger, Henley, and Hovland are the three that I'm targeting most out of those.
I think the one pause I have there, I agree that I would go Berger and Henley first. The one pause I might have is I'm interested in Harris English as well. He's 11.5. I probably would put him above Hovland. It's a $200 difference. English being the high salary guy, but English is a phenomenal putter, whereas Hovland struggles there. English fourth and birdies are better gained, whereas Hovland is ninth. The approach play relatively even, the accuracy relatively even. So I think I'd rather go with the guy with the better short game and go with Harris English over Hovland. So I think I'd rank him third over Hovland. Otherwise, Berger and Henley would be the top two for me as well. Yeah,
Hovland has been better as a putter, which is a good thing. There are still those events, such as the Zozo when he lost 4.6 strokes putting, lost 1.4 at the Tour Championship, 4.9 at the St. Jude, but you've also seen him gain roughly 5 at the PGA Championship and the Northern Trust, 3.4 at the Houston Open. Hovland is the kind of guy at this point in his career where I'm going to try to kind of buy back in early because everyone was in on him, and then he didn't, had the cursed win at the Puerto Rico Open, but hasn't really done enough since then to feel like you have to play him. But we know how good the ball striking is. We know that he's a really accurate driver. So if the putting starts to show signs of life, I want to be ahead of the curve. So that's kind of my thought process with Hovland. But Harris English definitely still flushing it and a very, very good play in his own right.
I think the reason that I'm wary of Hovland's putting for this week specifically is that it sounds like Paspalum is more similar to Bermuda than it is bentgrass, and bentgrass is a surface where Hovland has actually made gains. Mm-hmm. That's also why I'm wishy-washy on Joaquin Niemann, I guess, is because we tend to go to him on bentgrass. So I think that's my main reason for putting English above Hovland. But I this is splitting hairs because I think Hovland is easily number 4 on that list. It's just that I put him below English.
Yeah, it is tough to sift through these golfers. One thing you could do if you really view them close enough is, take a look around, see who's going to be least popular, who's not getting buzz, whose win odds end up being the worst by the time this event starts, and go with them.
Like you said, there's a large pool of golfers who can compete here, which is advantageous just because, if anyone can do it, you can pivot from the chalk pretty easily. Yeah. Which golfers' odds have moved since things opened? And it seems like there actually are some significant movers here, noteworthy movement.
Yeah, I pulled numbers a little later than usual, so that's my bad. But I still saw some stuff. I would say it doesn't really looking at this field, it didn't look like a field that would change too much. Maybe you have some other data, but Adam Long moved from 70 to 50, Ches Reavie 90 to 60, and Brian Stewart 150 to 100. So I think those are all interesting names. I actually like Adam Long and Ches Reavie quite a bit.
I looked at Ches. And then I looked at like the recent events, and it kind of gave me like a heart attack. Just because like we talked about mitigating disaster, and Chez is not doing that right now. Lost 2.2 putting at the RSM, 3.4 at the Shriners, 3.3 at the Sanderson Farms, 3.5 at the US Open, whatever. Yeah. But the ball striking is so good. And I feel like it kind of goes back to the discussion we had about Corey Connors, where you can defend them better when their ball striking is standout relative to guys in their salary tier. And I think that we actually do get that with Chez this week. So despite the fact that I am nervous about him, I think there is enough there where I can occasionally use Chez. It also helps at the upper 9,000 range. At least in my eyes, is probably the worst tier in this field relative to salary. So I think Chez is fine, but like I can't feel too confident given just how bad the putting has been recently.
Yeah, one of the things that gives me on Reavie, though, is good course form, which, again, is not really something that I factor in often, but 4 straight top 26 finishes at the Mayakoba. If he can just play his game and not put it off the green, he should,
You mean that very literally.
Yeah. He profiles as someone who can finish top 30, which isn't amazing. Right, if you want super high upside, probably look somewhere else. But at a certain point, he does have 2 top 10s since August. So
yeah, the Safeway and the St. Jude. So the ball striking matters for sure. And he finished 6th of the St. Jude despite losing 4.9 strokes putting.
Yeah. Yep. And gained at least 7 strokes just from approach in both of those high-end finishes. So like that's something he can do.
Right.
And if he's just not completely terrible with the putter, and again, we don't have strokes gain data here, no shot length, so you'd have to think that he probably putted okay to finish well.
Yeah. Chez is really bad in Bermuda, so if I'm going to play that angle, that would not go well. But which lower salary golfers have odds to stand out to you this week?
Brian Harmon. 60-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook, 7,000 on FanDuel. Sepp Straka, sounds like your boy this week. He's usually my boy. 80-1, 9,300. I like him fine. I like Denny McCarthy well enough, even though he goes against a lot of what I typically like. But at a course where it should be easy to kind of get to the green, I think we should bump up Denny McCarthy. He's also 80-1 at 9,200. Rory Sabatini's 80-1 at 8,700. And then Chris Kirk, Charlie Hoffman, John Huh, Pat Perez, Peter Malnati, Brian Stewart, and Andy Ogletree are all 100-1.
Yeah, I think that Harmon's the obvious guy there. McCarthy is not someone of my player picks. Is he in yours?
Not in my player picks, but again,
I would use Denny McCarthy. He's not my player picks, but I would use him. I
feel best with McCarthy whenever he shouldn't have to struggle much, right? That's kind of what I need. And he was one of the 6 guys who's top 30 in fairways gained and birdie or better rate gained. We know that it's primarily almost exclusively from the putting. But again, if he's not going to get into too much trouble, if he can just hit fairways,
right, that's
when you probably get the best out of Denny McCarthy.
I agree. So he's someone I will use. Not my player picks, but someone I will turn to. Weather for this week, Playa del Carmen is basically a rainforest, so there is a constant threat of rain like at all times. On Thursday, it's about 25% rain odds all Thursday, roughly 11-mile-per-hour winds. There is no difference based on tee time there. It always could rain at all times. Same thing for Friday, though the wind speeds are lower at 8 miles per hour. Thursday is the only day of the 4 days where the wind gets above 10 miles per hour, but it's likely to be wet all weekend. So I would take that in consideration. There could be an angle to stacking tee times because maybe the weather gets more volatile at certain times, but I don't think you'll be able to predict when that's going to happen based on the way the forecast looks. So maybe you play it based on, have a couple lineups with early tee times, couple with late. I don't think there is one that has an advantage over the others, though. So you can play that angle, but I wouldn't say one has a leg up over the other based on the forecast here on Tuesday. So let's move into our player picks here for the Mayakoba. Brandon, who stands out to you in the upper salary tier on FanDuel this week?
I like Victor Hovland at 11-3, even though Jim hates him.
I would never. He is our son.
You don't like him. He rates out well at this course. In my win simulations, we know he's an elite driver. He's both long. He's 34th in distance gained, but also accurate, 42nd in fairways gained over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. Very few golfers are that good at both. He's not elite in either of them, but that's good. And combined, he is 5th in strokes gained off the tee, so that is much more elite. He's 19th in strokes gained approach, 9th in birdie or better rate gained. He's really improved his short game as well. He's up to 39th in strokes gained around the green, 65th in putting over the past 50 rounds. He's kind of trending towards being a balanced golfer, one who has elite ball striking. The putting is not quite there yet, but it's very, very promising. I would be fine starting lineups with Hovland or Daniel Berger, who I think you'll talk about in a second. Just assuming that JT doesn't win, Brooks Koepka doesn't win, that they're not really in contention, which I know is scary, but I do think it's a justifiable approach this week for tournaments.
And I think the good thing of Hovland is what you mentioned, in that he has the ability to be what he needs to be from a driving perspective, so he can score on those par fives because he does it at distance, but when he needs to, put it on the fairway, he can. So I think that's really valuable. That's why I feel very comfortable putting him fourth in that list we were discussing. Just the other things, the short game pushes me lower, but I think that, if I have enough lineups, I would be more than okay using Victor Hovland within them. My first high salary play will be Justin Thomas, because we haven't really talked about why we like JT. Should be obvious, but just in case. He's not super accurate, but he's not a sprayer. He ranks 28th in good drives gained, so when he needs to hit a fairway, he can. He's also second in the field in approach and first in birdies or better gained, so he's just like he's a cut above the rest of the field. The win odds reflect that. So I think, to me, final call, 50% exposure. I know that's in line with the field, but I will not be in line with the field elsewhere. So I don't really care about, I know it's kind of like a boogeyman when it comes to DFS. I don't care personally. I will just deviate elsewhere. That's why I feel okay with Thomas. And I think there is a lot of value in not using Brian Harmon in a lot of the time with Thomas lineups that you do have. Brandon, any final thoughts for you on JT?
Yeah, I was going to say, just be careful, because it's very tempting to play Justin Thomas and Brian Harmon together. Just make sure if you do that your other four are a little less obvious, so that you can get a more unique lineup.
Yeah, so check out if you have access to popularity projections, or if you FanShare Sports sees getting buzz this week, check those out. Find golfers who are justifiable but not getting a lot of buzz, and use them as your four additional guys if you do want to use those two together. Who else are you targeting in this upper range on FanDuel?
Justin Thomas light, Russell Henley.
Is he actually light? I guess because maybe the putting. JT's not a great putter, so I don't know.
I'm just not going to put him in the Justin Thomas tier by any means, but statistically he lines up very well with Justin Thomas. It's Russell Henley, 10-9 on FanDuel. Leads the field in strokes gained approach, but is actually solid enough off the tee. He's 35th in strokes gained off the tee. The way that he does it, too, is kind of promising for this week. 129th in distance gained, but 11th in fairways gained. All told, he's first in good drive rate. He is second in scrambling, which is not something I'm looking for, but it doesn't hurt. There's just a lot of good in Henley's profile. The issue is the putter. He's 97th in strokes gained putting over the past 100 rounds on all surfaces, but it's not completely terrible. He's not dead last, and the ball striking is so good that he can kind of overcome that. He has a 29th in a missed cut here at this course, but he's really golfing on a new level. So I have a lot of confidence in Russell Henley this week.
So this is not a play style comp, but a feel comp. Russell Henley is kind of like Webb Simpson. Obviously they don't get there in the same way because Webb is such a good short game guy, but they are golfers who tend to do really well even when the course does not fit them. So when you get a course that does fit them, I feel like you should be really into them. Do you get similar vibes from Henley? I know, again, very different golfers in the way they get there, but he kind of feels similar to Webb.
Yeah, the things that they do well, they're so good at.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Daniel Berger. We talked about him a couple times as being a guy we both like a lot. Haven't really said why. You talked about Hovland kind of morphing into a Xander type play. Berger's already there because he's super well-rounded and should have both a good floor and a good ceiling. Berger ranks 28th or better in all four of the stats in my sheet via Fantasy National. His worst mark is fairways gained, but he's also 7th in good drives gained. So like Thomas, when he needs to be accurate, he can be. Berger is 5th in approach and 2nd in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds. He is 16th in overall putting the past 100 rounds. And Berger has used that to make 10 of 11 cuts since the end of the COVID layoff. 4 top 3 finishes in that time, and none of those were super recent, but that's in part because his off-the-tee play has been more spotty. I would bet that he takes a step forward here, so I am very in on Berger at 11-4. Brandon, what draws you towards Berger here?
A lot of what you said, and the salary is also nice. Just a really good golfer, much better putter than Justin Thomas. He's 16th over the past 100 rounds. Really good tee to green right now. 2nd in birdie or better rate gained. 20th in fairways gained. So like I said, he's one of the 6 golfers ranked top 30 in both of those stats. And he's the only one who's like better than 20th in birdie or better rate gained, and he's 2nd. So
yeah,
just kind of one of the few studs who actually hits fairways or can hit fairways. Because every golfer can hit fairways. It's just a matter of whether they care enough. So accuracy is always a little bit problematic to dig into, but I think the course should fit him well. So I'm really high on Daniel Berger.
Speaking of course fit, let's move into our mid-salary plays. Brandon, you have Ches Reavie as your number 1 pick, and it seems like he'd be a guy who, like we said, does fit this course well.
Yeah, he should. And he has historically 4 straight top 26s at El Camaleon. Should help calm the nerves about some of like the issues that he's got in his profile. I think he's one of the golfers we should always bump up when he plays on a course where he doesn't need to be long, can just hit fairways and sort of play his game. I actually wrote about him last year at this event. I used 41-1 to win. Not quite as good this year, but still in the mix. Over the past 50 rounds, though, he does lead this field in fairways gained. He's 4th in strokes gained approach, 120th in putting over the past 100 rounds. So that is a little bit scary, but he's 7th in opportunities gained. It's like 7th in birdie chances, but 103rd in birdie or better rate gained. So like, yeah, he still has to make the putts, but that's kind of makes him like a high floor play. He should not really get into too much trouble if he plays his game. So I think a lot more confident with your boy, and I say that usually ironically, but I think Ches is actually your boy compared to me. But I feel better about him than I think you do this week.
Yeah, which is a flip for usual, which makes sense because I am higher on your boy than usual and Sepp Straka this week. He is my first mid-range option. Straka's not accurate, which is a concern at this course, but he does grade out well elsewhere and like really well elsewhere. He is 26th in approach and 5th in birdies or better gained, and he's also not a bad putter. So like we get a low 9,000 guy who can actually do well in approach and doesn't suck on the greens. Feels rare. Straka is 86th in fairways gained. He's 60th in good drives gained. So, like, it's not a disaster, at least. Like, it's not good. It's definitely a negative, but it's not a disaster. And I can deal with that with his salary being at $9,300 with a lack of other fun options in this range. So, I am on Straka this week, Brandon. He's usually more so your guy than mine. So, how are you feeling about Straka this week?
Yeah, he's got a pretty colorful recent form. If you look at things, lost 4 strokes off the tee at the RSM, but gained 3.9 with approach. Lost 2.4 off the tee at the Houston Open, but gained 7.3 in approach. In those, he lost 5.4 putting, but gained 6.2. So he's a little more erratic than I would like, especially for someone who we kind of go to because he's a good iron player. The irons have been a little bit colder, but then they got a lot better. So I think that the process-wise, if you're looking for someone who should gain strokes with his irons this week, Straka is one of the few in this salary tier who I would feel good doing that. So I do think he's a good play.
Okay. Let's move to your other mid-salary play. You talked about Ches Reavie being a guy whose odds shifted pretty significantly. Another guy who did so is Adam Long. He is $9,500. And what do you see with Adam Long this week?
Yeah, I liked him before the odds improved from 70 to 50. He's 9,500, so I think that's a good salary, especially if you consider some sort of a start like Berger and Henley with Harmon instead of like Justin Thomas. You're kind of in this like 10,000-ish range, so you can spike up or spike down from there. But Long was a runner-up here last year, but there's more to like than just that. He's right around 50th in both ball striking stats, but is coming off 2 straight top 30 finishes with really good tee to green data. You could look at that and say he's going to regress more to like his usual average, which isn't amazing, but he's just a balanced golfer overall for the most part relative to guys in this tier. Not an elite birdie maker. He's just 79th in that stat over the past 50 rounds, but I do think he's one of the best plays in the range. My only concern is that the good finish last year draws people to him, but it does kind of feel like it's wide open in this tier, so I'm not that concerned.
How do you feel about this tier more broadly? Because I don't find it to be a very good tier. Like, I like the low 9,000 range. Okay. Like, there are multiple options there, but the 9,000 range to me in general is like underwhelming at best.
Yeah. So on numberFire, I usually at this point do like 2 featured picks in a tier and then try to get like 3 others I would consider. I was kind of stuck on like 4. With Ches Reavie, Kevin Stroman, who you'll talk about in a second. I think Joel Damon is in play. Good course form, and we know he can be a good ball striker. But like, it was kind of hard to find some plays I felt great about. If you throw Brennan Todd in at 10,000, it's more appealing. But as far as the 9,000 range goes overall, I don't love it, but I do like a few golfers, specifically Long, Reavie. Obviously, I just talked about them, but Harold Varner I think is a good play.
Yeah.
So there are options, but it's not strong enough where I'm like, I think the real play is building a balanced lineup between like 95 and 10-5. That's right out this week.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with you. Varner at 9.7 I think is interesting because like he is a bad putter, we know that, but he makes birdies still. So I think that 9.7, he's probably the one guy above 95 who I feel like decent about. I might go him above Ches. I don't know, but I think the better option is Kevin Stroman at $9,100 because he hasn't been consistent recently, and he's not a very good putter, so it's tough to feel great, but he at least has a path to a good finish. That's because Stroman, the ball striking should be good. He ranks 21st in fairways gained and 20th in approach the past 50 rounds. That has helped him to grade out as being 18th in birdies or better gained, despite the bad putting. He was third at the Safeway Open, gained 4.6 strokes putting there, which is not sustainable, but he also gained 5.9 tee to green. Just haven't really seen Stroman put it all together in terms of approach play and off the tee play at the same time. But we've talked about this. I've used this phrase probably ad nauseum recently. He has the building blocks for a good finish, and I think that Stroman has that. With this being more of an accuracy event, I think that could happen here. So I like Stroman a lot at 91. You mentioned that you like him too. What put you on Stroman?
I haven't heard you say building blocks.
I've said it a lot. I'm getting annoyed with myself.
I'm just kidding. I hear it all the time.
Okay.
With Stroman, just good ball striking, good tee to green numbers overall. 17th tee to green. You mentioned he's accurate, good approach numbers. Missed the cut at this course 2 years in a row, but before that had some good showings, 20th, 4th, and 34th. Again, we're not like the course form podcast, but I think it has a little more weight for these golfers who just aren't super consistently elite. So I think maybe that does help. Again, 2 missed cuts, the past 2 years, so it's not like it's a perfect predictor, but the form is there in the right stats to assume that he could finish, top 20 again.
Yep, I agree. So let's move into the value plays here for this weekend. Talk about a guy who you said you bet, before, I think you said you bet, before we got on air today. That's Tyler Duncan at $8,400. What drew you towards Duncan from a betting perspective, but also for DFS at that salary?
Just a good number I found him at to bet. The salary I think is good as well at $8,400 on FanDuel. He's made 3 straight cuts at this course. That's always welcomed. Again, I've said this a lot, but I've kind of come around to this a little more, where the value plays are probably a little more course sensitive to like course form and course fit. Duncan is 27th in strokes gained off the tee and 20th in strokes gained approach, though. That's pretty great. I wouldn't actually think too many golfers in this field are like top 30 in both, especially at $8,400. He's also 7th in fairways gained, so like the way that he should play in ball strike is pretty obvious. So I think that he's in a good spot. I think that the course fit is right, and we've seen it pan out for him in the past.
I actually did consider Duncan as one of my player picks as well. So I think that he makes a lot of sense. He's kind of like a discount Chez, I think, is the way that I would view him. He's $8,400. Chez is 96, I believe. Like, and they do the things they do well, they do similarly. So I think that Duncan is someone I would definitely go to here. I'm very okay with that personally. My first low salary play is John Huh. He actually won the Mayakoba back in 2012. Obviously, we don't care about that. Like, that's a long time ago. He's gone through a lot of stuff since then. But the past few events have been interesting. He's trying to come back from an undisclosed injury. Hasn't really played a lot recently, but in the 3 events since Huh has come back, he's been at the Shriners, the Houston Open, and the RSM. He's gained tee to green in all 3 of those. He actually gained 6.7 on approach at the Shriners. His good finish was at the RSM, and that was fueled by putting. But when Huh was around earlier in his career before this injury, he was a really solid putter, and he tended to put the ball in the fairway. And that's kind of what we're looking for this week. So there's a lot of risk here, and I would not go to Huh in a cash game, but I don't hate it for tournaments, though. So I think that this is kind of interesting. Brandon, what about you? Any interest in getting in on John Huh off the injury or no?
Probably not. I don't think that. I think you made a good case for him, so it's not like I'm not sold.
Thank you.
I would rather play Charlie Hoffman, Pat Perez, Adam Hadwin. I think 3 names is enough to imply that I probably won't get there.
Okay.
So I think it's just I would rather go with process plays I feel a little bit better about.
I will never root against a good story. So, John Huh, welcome to the player pool for this week. Let's move to your second value play. Who else do you like here below 9,000?
Tom Hoagy. It's not one I feel particularly confident about, but it's more of an upside differentiation play, which I think we could use a lot of this week, especially if you make the decision to lock in Justin Thomas and Brian Harmon, and then you try to find ways to get different from there. So I think Hoagy would fit at 8,000. He is 33rd in approach, 5th in opportunities gained, which is a really promising number. He's 37th in birdie or better rate gained, so not quite as good as the opportunity number, but definitely not terrible. I think it's good enough to put him in the mix for someone who needs to go low at this course. He has missed 2 straight cuts here and 2 straight cuts overall. But again, I think the peripheral data is quite good for the salary. If the missed cuts scare you, I think Adam Hadwin, Charlie Hoffman are interesting. Brian Stewart, a little bit. Henrik Norlander, Mark Hubbard. But I think Jim's play next is obviously the best process play of the week.
Yeah, that's Brian Harmon. I'll talk about him in a second, but I think I like Henrik Norlander as well. He's $8,200. I'm on board with that. Could get behind that for sure. I almost talked myself into Chesson. I know. But I think that Harmon is kind of just the way to go. And I think that Hoagie's defensible too. So let's talk about Harmon, because from a cash game perspective, it's very simple. You take the value where you get it, and you just lock in Harmon. I am good with being high on him for tournaments too, as long as I leave myself some wiggle room in case he flops. So again, 80 to 75% or so of lineups. And the reason there is that Harmon does seem really safe. We mentioned the made cuts before, but he just profiles well for this course. 23rd in fairways gained, 29th in birdies or better gained, 18th in overall putting. And yeah, the approach play does leave something to be desired, but I think the benefits outweigh the downsides here. So I like Brian Harmon a lot. Brandon, any final thoughts for you on Harmon here?
I think we covered it.
Yeah, so we're good to go. I think for cash games, it's Thomas, Harmon, and work from there. For tournaments, figure out how you want to handle those guys based on your process, and just know that they will be very popular, and allocate your exposure accordingly. Let's do our win bets for the Mayakoba Golf Classic. If you are coming back to the e-check after a while away, we have changed up our win bets. We're now just betting them relative to the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. We get 2 picks. We can overlap in the picks, so we're just picking. It's not relative to odds. We're just picking our 2 favorites based on their odds. Sorry, I phrased that very poorly. We're picking our 2 favorites based on their odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's not one at a certain range and one below that, just our 2 favorites. I have no idea who won the bobble hat last week, and I probably don't want to know. It was you? Okay, cool. That's why I didn't want to know. So how dare you answer?
That might be.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, it doesn't even matter now for the win picks because.
Yeah, I know, but whatever. I
Sorry.
still have pride. I have some pride. Maybe not much, but like there's some lingering maybe pride. Let me get my 2 in mind here before I ask you so that I'm not like stealing from you. Okay, I've got 1 and okay. I think I've got 2. So if you want to make yours, go ahead.
The one I definitely was going to go with is Russell Henley at 27.
Okay. He's 22 now though, so you take him at 22.
Oh man.
Sorry.
That's
still a good number for him.
I'll stick with it. My other one, I don't normally bet 2 kind of favorites. I'm eyeing up Hovland at 18, but at this point I might go Brendan Todd at 50.
Okay. Well, we have one overlap. So I'm going to go Berger and Todd. I think that's fine to overlap. We had an overlap last time too, didn't we?
Yeah, because you didn't like Harris English, and then I was like, you know what, just make your pick so I won't skew you because I already have mine in mind. And you're like, I'm gonna go with Harris English.
Whatever. Berger is the one I feel really good about. Like he was the one who I was like, okay, I know I'm gonna bet Berger. He's 16-1. Todd is 50-1, and you also have Henley, who is 22-1. And I think that Henley at 22 is actually still a good number. It's not as good as 27, obviously, but I think that's still a good number for him given what he can do. So I think I like your pick there.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was nice of you.
That is all that we have for today. That's actually all we have for 2020 on the PGA podcast. We'll be back with you in January as they pick back up for not a new PGA Tour season, but a new PGA Tour calendar year. Back with you in January at the regular time, 10 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday on the FanDuel YouTube page. If you're looking for other Heat Check Fantasy podcasts, we have our Week 12 NFL recap. That went up yesterday morning. I mushed Will Fuller by talking about how great he was, and now he's suspended. But outside of that, you can get thoughts on Alvin Kamara, thoughts on Austin Eckler, who is the Brian Harmon of the Week 12 NFL slate, thoughts on Antonio Gibson as well. So make sure you find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, we'll also have another podcast on Thursday previewing the Week 13 NFL DFS main slates. Make sure you check that out on the FanDuel YouTube page, 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. And then the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter. Where can they find you there?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your PGA DFS lunch for this weekend. We'll talk to you once again in 2021. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.